I'm gonna send them in. Thanks, guys.
That's a great question. I gotta get this great walk-on shot.
Wait back up. Another candidate coming in. Hello.
Hey, Governor. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Quick logistical question. Did you bring any campaign signs here? Did I miss them?
Yeah, I don't know if we actually even broadcast. Yeah, we have a table somewhere. I'm not sure that we brought a bunch of campaign signs. So
So no signs, no swag?
no swag. If you want something, I'll send you something along the way.
Have you, I guess, you know, in terms of visiting New Hampshire compared to Iowa, do you plan to come here more? Do you plan to come like west of Nashua?
Yeah, you know, and I made a couple trips actually before I even got in. And one of them that was going to be my first house party got canceled because I was in the middle of trying to save Medicaid expansion. My legislature was still meeting until May. But I've made both a couple trips so far and had some good house parties. Expect to have a lot more. I guess I started 4 or 5 months later because I actually had a job to do.
You said that in your speech. I mean, what, did you just think of running later on, or kind of?
So my legislature's 60% Republican. We expanded Medicaid for 100,000 Montanans. It got killed by a reauthorization by ballot initiative when tobacco companies spent $26 million killing it. So right after that, my legislature was meeting, and I actually had to make sure that we got Medicaid expansion reauthorized. Signed my last bill on a Monday, announced on a Tuesday. Now, if I had to make the choice between getting 100,000 folks health care or chasing 100,000 donors, easiest decision I'd ever make. And I'd also note that, like, you look back, and Bill Clinton didn't even announce until October the year before, that we still have 157 days, I think, before the first primary. And I count on folks in New Hampshire and other places to make sure to use those days wisely.
Governor, a number of candidates have come to the state of New Hampshire and unveiled mental health care plans. They've talked about deaths of despair. Montana has the highest suicide rate in the country. Can you talk a little bit about your plans to confront that epidemic and why it's been so hard in the state of Montana to break that?
Well, I think it's difficult in many respects, that especially in larger states, you know, mine's a state of 147,000 square miles, and we're really good at dealing with physical health, but we're not always good as a state or even primary care providers dealing with mental health. So that there are some things, like when we expanded Medicaid, that got 30,000 more people regular mental health treatment, 10,000 substance use disorder treatment. To the point of youth suicides, though, it is one of those things where as a governor you feel like you have so much power and authority but feel so powerless when this happens. So we've taken targeted evidence-based dollars, and I've got it through my legislature, targeted just at youth suicide. Things like, we know that you can't just address the issues when they're a junior or senior in high school. It's actually working on it all the way from the beginning. Things like the PACS Good Behavior game, which builds the resiliency in children. And then now we're expanding that more and more across the state. We're also using telehealth and other issues to address sort of the challenges along the way, that whether you live in a urban area or a rural area, you ought to be able to have quality access to mental health treatment.
And do you think the United States is undergoing a mental health crisis?
I think any individual family that struggles with some of the challenges recognizes it. And I think that it is good that we're finally hitting this time where we recognize the differences and the distinctions between physical health and mental health. And I think we do have to do more. Another thing that I did is got, for insurance companies, parity between physical health and mental health coverage. I mean, we have to take all of these issues on, because any family that struggled, or as you note, the losses of life, are something that we deeply, deeply have to address.
Governor, I'm curious about your thoughts about some of the Democrats releasing climate plans. They plan to spend $3 trillion over 10 years, $10 trillion over 10 years, $16 trillion over 10 years. Is that kind of federal spending to address climate change, does that concern you as a more moderate candidate?
Well, I think, you know, I'd push back only like if being a progressive is actually making progress in people's lives. I've doubled the wind, quadrupled the solar. we've actually made meaningful progress in so many different areas. And I think that's part of being outside of Washington, D.C. as a governor versus folks in D.C. that just write these big plans that may never, ever go anywhere. So from my perspective, look, we have to address climate change. We have to take steps along the way, but there are a few things that people don't recognize along the way. I mean, scientists say we have to be net neutral as a world by 2050. I think we could do it 2040 or even earlier. And doing things like rejoining Paris, the fuel efficiency standards, and infrastructure investments, because there are things that the federal government has to do. But I think that often Democrats aren't talking about at least three things along the way. One of which is that even the first George H.W. Bush talked about addressing greenhouse effect with the White House effect. Now the Republican Party, because of dark money in our elections, is the only major political party in the world that does acknowledge climate change is real. Second of which, often when Democrats are talking about the big plans, the climate crisis, we ought to be talking about it as a climate opportunity for good jobs, because far too often you also have people that have spent their whole lives powering this country, and Democrats make it sound like they're part of the problem. And I guess third, that 44% of Americans don't have $400 in their pocket right now. And it's hard if you can't even imagine how to make it till the end of the month to worry about the end of the world. So taking immediate and durable steps, we need to do it. Some of these plans, look, DC hasn't balanced a budget on time in 22 years. So I'm not sure that all of them are quite grounded in realities, but that comes from being a governor where I actually have to balance a budget.
Governor Bullock, do you think that a wealth tax could pass in this country?
I don't know. I mean, to tell you the truth, I think it would be, look, we had to amend the Constitution to get an income tax. And now we're talking about taxing income that's already been taxed. And I think that whether that could actually pass, and I think that as far as income inequality and what's happened, I think it's disgusting. But again, some plans seem like they're written for press releases when I actually have to get things done.
Governor, sometimes candidates talk about it was just the right time for them to run. You talked about just now, a little while ago, about you had responsibilities as governor and that delayed your entry. And did the thought ever cross your mind that because of your responsibilities that this may not be the right time for you to run?
Well, I finished up my legislative session, and I'm excited that there's this many people excited about running. But I also think it was the right time for me to run, because we got to recognize that if we can't win back places that we lost, we're going to lose this election. I don't care if we run up the votes by 2 million more in California. If you can't connect in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. If you look at this state we're in right here, as I noted, a third of the counties here went Obama, Trump. And this is also, this is about winning the White House, but it's also about taking your state house back. So I think we got to find someone. I'm the only one in this field that actually won in a Trump state. The only one in the field as the only governor left that's actually gotten meaningful and progressive things done. And I take that record against anybody in this field when it comes to impacting people's lives. So this is, the most important election certainly in my lifetime. Wanted to make sure if I can help us win this election and recognize that winning this election isn't all about Donald Trump. It's actually about making folks believe that the government and the DC could work for them, then I should be in it.
So on that messaging for those Midwestern states, are there any terms that you think Democrats or the eventual nominee shouldn't use so as not to alienate,
Well, it's like, this isn't like some magical word jujitsu, right? I mean, from the perspective of, 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump, and not by me changing my political views or values along the way. It's focusing on the problems of the here and now and demonstrating that we can actually impact their lives along the way. Not sort of this theoretical, or I said at one point, wish list economics. I think folks, and I don't think folks want everything for free. They just want a fair shot at a better life.
Governor, just kind of a question on style and rhetoric. Some of your competitors have been dropping F-bombs, swearing to their supporters at their events. What do you make of that? Is it an effective device? Would you ever do that?
Well, I actually Sorry, children, I swore on Comedy Central this week. You know, look, people should be whoever they are, and that's not.
Does it turn voters off? you think?
You'd have to talk to voters. I think what turns voters off is that if they feel like this overall discussion that we're having isn't connected to their daily lives. We have to give them a reason to believe that actually we could make Washington, D.C. and this economy work for them.
Last question.
The way you were talking about being in this race to give a voice to people that were lost in the 2016 election, do you think of yourself as an issue candidate the way maybe Jay Inslee was on climate change, but for you it's with voters in the middle of the country?
Well, I think that, you know, and I've done more on kicking the corrupting influence out of money in our elections than anybody in here. And anybody that says that's a fringe issue, if we're actually going to address gun safety, if we're going to address climate, if we're going to address income inequality, if we're going to address the fact that Costco can negotiate prescription drug prices, but it's illegal for the federal government to do so, I think we have to address that. So I think that is the single issue that's holding us all back. But for me, it's also, and it's maybe from where I come from too. I mean, I was Democratic Governors Association chair in 2015. We had Montana and we had Colorado. Then you had Pennsylvania, but other than that, you didn't have any Democratic governors until you got the coasts. If this becomes a party that's just represented and reflected by the coasts, you're never going to be able to get anything meaningfully done.
Was that your mission?
Well, no, my mission is to be Donald Trump, and I think that I could do it in a way that nobody else could, because I'm fairly certain that I could make connections in all of these places.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all very much.